Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. And we're getting ready to start. So while we're doing that, I'm going to share my screen just so that we can get started here. There we go. There we go. So we are up and running. Again, good evening, everybody. It's great to have you here. It's great to be back on this 30th of March, 2026. And I just wanted to jump right in and get us all set up for Ask Me Anything. So let's move over here. So, for those of you who are just joining us, I thought we would start off with talking about how this works in case you haven't been here before. If you have been here before, then you do know how it's working, and that's awesome. But if you haven't been here before, then if you have an aviation related question, please put it in the comments section. That comment section is the live chat section of the live stream. So please feel free to put those in. I also have some pre-submitted questions from my website. If you got the invite, then when you looked at the invite, there was a link. And so if you would like to put in questions for the next Ask Me Anything, you can put those in at any time. That link should work 24/7, 365. And yeah, please feel free to put any questions in there. There is a brief questionnaire that kind of goes along with it, but it's just so that I can get a better view or idea of what you're asking. It is relatively anonymous. The reason I say relatively is because there is a spot for you to put your name in if you'd like to, but you do not have to put your name in to submit questions. As we're going through this during the Ask Me Anything session, I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. But if I can't answer a question live, I will research the answer and I'll either post it in the final comments associated with this published live stream, or in a couple of cases, I've actually redone the question in the next Ask Me Anything with a different answer. In fact, part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because this month I actually have a question that was asked last month, and I have some more information that I'd like to provide. So more on that as we go along. So let's move on into the Ask Me Anything. So let's start with what we typically start with, which is first of all, welcome. And I want to know if any of you since the last Ask Me Anything, have you passed a written exam? Has anybody soloed? Has anyone passed a stage check or a check ride? And what other things did you accomplish that you think we should celebrate? Please put any accomplishments that you think we should celebrate into the comment section. We'd love to give you a thumbs up or the clap hands emoji or anything that would help you celebrate any accomplishments that you might have. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of move through the several of the slides because I'm not seeing anything show up on the chat yet. But if you are interested, please feel free to put anything in that comment section at any time during the live stream, and we will celebrate it. So thank you very much, and here we go. We're going to jump in with our first question. So the first question is, and I've gotten this question 3 times since the last Ask Me Anything, and the question is there a way to train with Scott online or in person? And the answer is yes, there is. You can go to https://tidycal.com, Scott Kuhn, and you can schedule a 30-minute one-on-one with me. Or if you're interested in doing a practice oral exam for a check ride, we can do a mock oral as well. What I ask is that you answer the brief questionnaire that's part of setting up the reservation. That brief questionnaire just lets me know what questions you're interested in, how we should connect, and a little bit more detail about the question. I will also put the link for scheduling in the comment section of the published Ask Me Anything at a later time. So please feel free. If we're working on something here and you want a little bit more information, if you're working on something with your instructor and you want a second opinion, or you want a little bit more information on it, then then please feel free to schedule a one-on-one. It will be like a Zoom or Teams meeting, etc. And at that point, then we can set up some time, and we can actually talk face to face, or at least video face to face, and get you more information or the second opinion or whatever it is you're looking for. Let's see. Jess Wanth KF5BX asks me, how do you say your last name? Well, it's actually pretty simple, for me anyway, and it is Scott Coon, Koon, just like the animal, but with a K is how I say it when I'm introducing myself to people. So again, Scott Coon is how I pronounce my name. But thank you for the question, and we'll move on to some of the questions that were submitted over the line. So the first question that I wanted to jump into today is, an anonymous person said, for the DPE oral and practical exam, what are the major differences between sport pilot and private pilot? And this person is thinking about just pursuing sport pilot initially, and then maybe or maybe not adding private pilot later. And I think this is a really good question, especially right now. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement that's going on with Mosaic and what's going on in the sports world, or in the sport pilot world. And so I think there's a lot of interest in the sport pilot certificate. The sport pilot can be a very, very good place to start, especially if you're looking to dip your toe into aviation and you want to get into the aviation world with a little bit less training and a little bit less expense. For example, the private pilot training takes a minimum of 40 hours of flight training, and the sport pilot takes a minimum of 20 hours. So there is about half of the time that is required for you to work through the tasks that are necessary for your sport pilot versus your private pilot. Having said that, there are some limitations as sport pilot. For example, as a sport pilot, you're limited to flying VFR only during the day. You're not allowed to fly at night, and you're not allowed to fly under instrument conditions. When you get your private pilot, you can add an instrument rating, which you can add on to your private pilot, which would allow you to fly in instrument conditions. Some of the other limitations are you need to be able to, you will fly less than 10,000 feet MSL, or within 2,000 feet of ground, whichever is higher. But again, if you happen to live in the Midwest like I do, then 10,000 feet MSL is going to be your ceiling for a sport pilot. And then again, with just your regular sport pilot certificate, you are limited as to the airspaces that you can go into. You, as a sport pilot, you can go into class Golf and class Echo airspace, but without the appropriate training and certifications and endorsements, you can't be in class Bravo, class Charlie, or class Delta airspace. So again, it does allow you to get into an airplane a little bit faster, and with a little bit less training, but there are some limitations to what you can do. Now, the reason that I kind of spelled it out that way, the reason, thank you, Brad. The reason that I'm spelling it out that way is because those are some of the differences that are going to end up happening in a sport pilot practical exam versus a private pilot practical exam. For example, when you are training for your sport pilot, you're not going to be doing the 3 hours of nighttime training that is required for your private pilot exam. Further, you don't need to do the 3 hours of instrument training that is required, or I shouldn't say instrument training because it's not quite instrument training. But you need to have 3 hours of being able to manipulate the airplane and control the airplane only by reference to instruments. So that kind of stuff you would not be doing, and therefore those kinds of things won't show up on a sport pilot practical test versus a private pilot practical test. Other than that, for the most part, the types of knowledge that you're going to need and the knowledge that you're going to need to display and the tasks that you're going to be displayed are very, very similar. It's just you're going to go into much deeper. You're going to need to be able to uh, uh, know more and know the information deeper for private pilot than you would for sport pilot. For anybody that's interested in pursuing the sport pilot rate, certificate versus the private pilot certificate, I would highly recommend that you download for free the practical test standards. Now, over here on this side, as you can see where I'm wiggling this, this is the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standards, and they were published in November of 2023 and took effect in 2024. You'll notice that the Sport Pilot and Sport Pilot Flight Instructor rating practical test standards is a little bit different, um, and um, and uh, but it was also published at the same time. There may be some changes coming up in this practical test standards document because of Mosaic. You'll notice that this was actually published. Expect that there's some changes coming up, but when going to take effect and when we're going to see a new PTS for Sport Pilot. But if you're interested, I would download the Sport Pilot PTS and take a look at it, because again, this is going to be the designated pilot examiner's Bible for what they talk about, what they're going to ask you to both demonstrate from a skill level and from a knowledge level. So all the information that you're going to be tested on for your sport pilot check ride is going to be in this pilot or practical test standards, just like everything that you're going to be asked about and asked to demonstrate for your private pilot is going to be in the airplane private pilot for airplane category airman certification standards. So to get a much better picture of the differences, you can download both of these for free. If you go to the FAA site, faa.gov, you can look up Airman Certification Standards, and you'll see the list of all of these. You can actually then go back and search for practical test standards, or you can actually search for Sport Pilot practical test standards, and this comes up on their website too. And again, both of these are free to download. They come down as PDFs, so then you can feel free to utilize them, take a look at them, take notes on them, and investigate them as much as possible. But that will give you the best, most formal, most official difference between what the sport pilot and the private pilot check rides would look like. I hope that answers your question, but thank you very much, Anonymous, for that question. Let me look here. Brad Sewer 7538 said, me dropping everything to watch Scott's live. Thank you, Brad. That's awesome. Let's see. Barb Dwyer 22 says, can you enter a towered echo with sport? You know, well, that's a really interesting question, because I'm not familiar with too many Class Echo towered airports. Usually, if there's a tower, it's usually Class Delta, Class Charlie, or Class Bravo. But you are allowed to enter Class Echo airspace with a sport pilot certificate. So anyway, so at that point, I think the answer to your question is a definite maybe. If you are aware of a Class Echo that has a tower on it, that would be a good question for your local FSDO or for your instructor or the designated pilot examiner. Let's see, Jez Wanthraj KF5BX says, is this only for American citizens? And the answer to that is no. I believe that you can get permission to train in the United States, but you would have to go through the normal TSA flight training safety program, just like you would if you were going to do your private pilot certification. And that requires that you fill out a form, that they do a background check on you. If you've not had that background check done before, they would require you to go be fingerprinted so that they could complete the background check. And then once they've completed the background check, they would reach out to you and give you permission to start training in the United States. Once you've got that permission to start training in the United States, then you can reach out to a flight school, and they will receive the same information from the TSA. If they are doing what they're supposed to, then a flight school cannot or should not start training you to fly unless you have received that approval from the TSA. So hopefully that answers your question. Um, and the other question from Mason Flores, let's see, it looks like 16I is, have you ever flown in a cloud? And the short answer is yes, I have. In fact, this last week, I was moving an airplane from Rochester to Madison, and that flight we actually had to fly through a cloud to get to the top. But I am an instrument rated pilot. In fact, I'm a instrument rated flight instructor as well. So I have flown in a cloud, and but it takes a lot of training, and I would not take that responsibility or that task lightly. Hopefully that helps there. Um, and yes, Sergeant Ross 22 says, "Gotcha." So being towered isn't the stipulation. It kind of is the stipulation, but the reason it's the stipulation is because that's how Class Delta, Class Charlie, and Class Bravo are are identified. Most Class Echo airspaces are non-towered if they happen to be, whether they go all the way to the ground or whether they stop at 1,250 or 700 feet AGL. Really, those are largely non-towered airspaces, and the people that you would have to do, you'd have to self-announce your position if you have a radio. If you don't have a radio, of course, you can't self-announce your position. But at that point, part of the big difference between sport pilot and private pilot in that respect is you really don't have to be spending time talking on the radio. That having to do 10 takeoffs and landings at a towered airport, which you need to do for private pilot, you do not have to do for your sport pilot, and that those differences in training are part of the big difference between what you're going to do on the check ride and what you're going to do while you're doing your training. Okay, I'm going to move to the next one, and then I'll come back to some of these online. Thank you very much for submitting these in the chat. This is very exciting. So the next question is, and this is the one, this one came up last month. And the question is, I'm coming back from a 3-week break. My last flight was steep turns ending with a crosswind landing where I needed instructor help. It wasn't confidence inspiring. Any advice on how to regain my momentum and more importantly, confidence in the plane? And I'll be honest, I just really said, why don't you sit down and chat with your instructor, and the two of you can kind of brainstorm on how this works. And I still think that's a really good idea. I don't want to not use that as advice, but I do want to add some things to this. So first of all, if you've been gone from the airplane for a long time, I think it would be a challenge, and I think it's unrealistic for you to jump back in the plane and start where you left off. Flight training is a skill that deteriorates very fast, especially when you're at the beginning. So what I would do, what I would recommend is I would recommend taking a step back, maybe going back a couple of lessons and just spending some time with your instructor, reviewing what you were good at, what you succeeded at, because that, as you mentioned in your question, that confidence building of being able to get back in and accomplish some things rather than getting in and immediately struggling because it's a new skill that you haven't seen before. I would start with some relatively simple maneuvers, whether that be going out, getting into slow flight, getting out of slow flight. Maybe going out, if you were good at ground reference maneuvers, maybe going out and doing some ground reference maneuvers before that. Maybe it's just getting in the airplane and flying from one airport to the next for fun. Because while you're doing that, while you're flying from one place to the next for fun, you're going to be practicing things like maintaining altitude, standard rate turns, climbs, descents, your basic maneuvers. But do something that you know you're going to be successful at. Do that for a couple of times until your confidence until you get your confidence back, and then dip your toe into trying to get back into the I've got to get this done. I'm going to pick up my next task. I'm going to pick up my next maneuver, etc. In many cases, especially if you're doing Part 61 training, there isn't. It's not a race. I know that there are a lot of questions online where people go, "Hey, how long did it take you to solo?" I soloed in 3.3 hours, or whatever the case may be. And the bottom line is everybody's different and everybody starts in a different place. If somebody soloed in 3.3 hours, I can almost guarantee you that they were probably flying at a very small non-towered airport. Not always, but it's probably a high probability that they didn't really need to worry too much about talking on the radio, that they didn't really need to worry too much about too much other traffic, and that way they could focus specifically and only on the airplane. If somebody comes back to me and says, "Oh my gosh, Scott, it's taking me forever. I've flown for 30 hours and I've still not soloed yet." I'm going to start asking questions like, "Are you in a complex airspace? Are you also trying to talk on the radio? Is it a very busy airspace? Are you flying a complex airplane? Are you starting with an airplane that's got a throttle and your six pack, or are you starting in a Cirrus or other technically advanced aircraft?" Again, there's a lot of points here that can make it take less or more time. And so I really think those comments and comparisons of whether you've soloed yet, how fast things are going, how fast you're moving through your training, they can hurt you as much as they can help you, because everybody's situation is just a little different, and you may not be comparing apples to apples. But anyway, my general advice is talk to your instructor, take a couple steps back, maybe just plan a fun flight where you just do something that you and your instructor think is going to be fun. It's not wasted time because it's still teaching you to get in the airplane and move the airplane from one place to the next. You can still have a lot of educational value from doing a flight that's just fun and confidence building. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully that adds a little bit more information to the answer that I gave last week. Let's see some of the other comments that are in the chat. Let's see. MTAS pilot says, "What's the best advice for a CFI candidate and best method for studying for the oral?" Um, well, let's see. In general, I would say, I know, first of all, I know there are a couple of people on the chat right now, or there at least were, that are CFIs. So if you have advice for MTAS pilot on how you would recommend that they study for their CFI, their initial CFI oral, please feel free to add those into the comments. I am but one person, and I do have some thoughts on that matter, but I am certainly not going to be the only person that has really good ideas. So if you have other ideas besides what I add, please feel free to jump in and add them to the chat. But from my perspective, the CFI check ride is very different than your private pilot instrument and commercial check rides have been. Your private pilot instrument and commercial, the oral portion of that check ride is really about, it's really about you knowing the FARs and about weather, and really demonstrating that you know the materials that your instructor has helped you go over, or the home learning course or whatever that you did. So it's really about testing your knowledge of that. The CFI check ride has a very different flavor on it. There are some technical pieces where you're going to be asked to demonstrate your knowledge, but largely what the CFI check ride is about is how well can you teach that information. So really the best way to prepare for your CFI oral is to put your lesson plans together, get familiar with your lesson plans, get familiar with any teaching aids that you have, and then go teach. Go find somebody that's willing to learn from you. That could be somebody else at the flight school that you're at. It could be a relative who's always been interested in flying. It could be another CFI candidate. But practice delivering that information, and try putting that information in a way that makes sense to somebody else. Then let them ask questions about it. I'm noticing here, Rich Reese Pilot says, "Practice teaching in front of a friend." Video it and force yourself to watch it. Your teaching will improve very quickly. I think that is great advice. I will say the act of me putting together these videos has significantly changed and I think improved the way that I interact with one-on-one with my students when I am teaching live as well. Because again, as I put the videos together and edit them, I get to see myself explain things quite often. And sometimes I look at it and go, ooh, that didn't make any sense at all. So I'll strike it, go re-edit or go reshoot it, go re-edit it, and then put it into the video. I think the same thing is very true as you're preparing for your check ride. Go through, teach a lesson, then go back and watch it if you can. I mean, everybody's probably got a phone, so you've got the ability to record yourself teaching that lesson, and then go back and be brutal on yourself. Wow, I stumbled through that explanation, or wow, if I had been listening to that explanation, I don't think I would have understood any of it. And then go back, fix it, record yourself doing it again. So again, very good, and thank you, Rich, for suggesting that. Um, so uh, that's how I would prepare for the oral. And again, it's largely about you demonstrating that you can teach the information rather than just you demonstrating that you know the information. Now, of course, you do have to know the information to be able to teach it, but really the focus is about you putting together your lesson plans and you being able to walk through how to deliver that information to a student. And so that's what I would focus on, and that's how you'll get better for your oral check ride. The other thing that I would not hesitate to do is, if you can, sit down with several CFIs and teach them things and ask them for their feedback. Um, they've been through it before, and I will say there is a big difference, or there was for me. Let me put it that way. For me, there was a big difference in passing the check ride and then actually starting to become a working CFI. Um, when I got done with my oral, of course, I was as sharp as I thought I could be. I knew, I had a lot of stuff at the top of my head, so I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be great. Let me deliver my knowledge to the world." um, Unfortunately, it didn't take very long for somebody to ask me a question that I had absolutely no idea about, or to ask me to demonstrate something, and it worked really well in the check ride, but it didn't work really well with the student pilot in the airplane with me. So what's the difference? So again, talk to fellow CFIs, people that have gone from passing the check ride into instructing, and ask them what their advice would be. They have a wealth of knowledge that they can share with you, and it's hard earned knowledge as well. So don't be afraid to chat with them. Okay, again, thank you, Rich, and thank you, MTAS Pilot, for the question, and thank you, Rich, for the suggestion. Um, let's see. Let me go down to this next question, and then I'll come back. Okay, so the next question is: my ruler on ForeFlight only shows magnetic heading, not true heading. Thus, I can't follow your advice in the video, turbocharge your route planning using ForeFlight. Thank you for the question. I have been asked that question before, and to be honest, I'm not sure how I answered it, but I do. The challenge is, I believe by default, the settings for flight use magnetic heading because that's what you're going to use when you're in the airplane. And their for flight kind of assumes that you're going to bring it up and you're going to be looking at all of the, if you're doing the ruler measuring and all that stuff in the airplane, you're going to be wanting it in magnetic because the magnetic compass is what you're going to be using to tell what your direction is while you're in the airplane. However, it is fairly easy to set for flight to use true heading instead. It's just hidden because it's about 2 levels deep. So let me move to our next slide here and show you. So if you go to settings, so if you go to the more menu here, the hamburger, and then go to settings, you'll see this screen that comes up right here. When you've got this screen, what I usually do to filter it out and make it easier to find is I will type in the word units and hit enter. And then when you do that, you'll see this units and time preference setting. if you click into that, you get the units and time settings uh, uh, screens, and it's all your times. Do you want it in local time? Do you want it in Zulu time? Do you want it in some other category? Your wind speed. Do you want the wind speed in knots? A lot of these things are set by default because they want you to. I mean, they make sense. We use knots most of the time. If you're if you're not in the United States, you probably aren't using inches of mercury. The temperature is automatic, visibility, miles, and statute, etc., instead of meters and things like that. So, but if you go down here um, to bearing and track instruments, this line right here, and you click on true, or well, it should say magnetic if you're looking in magnetic. Oh, that's right. Okay, I see what you're saying. My head's in the way. So let me move this over. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Let's move this over here and we'll get this out of the way. We'll put this in the way. Move this over here. Oop, that's not helping. Ah, let's just get this one out of the way. So if you go down to that bearing and measurement instruments, and you click the true, in my case, it says true, but if you click magnetic at that point, for some reason I'm having trouble with my slide, but if you click that, oh, that's what happened. There we go. So if you go to bearing and track instruments and click into that menu, you're going to see two options. One is magnetic and one is true. If you choose true and then back out of that, everything that you see from that point on should be, that's interesting. Let's get out of here and then move this way. Nope. That is really interesting. There we go. Now my head's out of the way. But if you do that and click true and move out, then the ruler should be showing true course rather than magnetic course. Hopefully that helps. I apologize for all of the machinations as I tried to get my head out of the way. So, but anyway, thank you for the question. Hopefully that helps. And once you've got that set to true, then you should be able to use everything the way I outlined it in the video. Let's see. Perfect. Okay. So let me move on. Let's see. Come down here and look at some of the chat questions. The barometric pressure is too high or too low into altimeter. What can you do? You have to fly if you have to fly. That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have an answer to that. So if barometric pressure is is in like the 31 or is over 33 inches of mercury, um, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. Or if the barometric pressure is way too low, what are you going to do? I would say that I'm going to have to investigate that further. I've never run into that question before. That doesn't mean that it hasn't come up before, but I don't have a good answer to that. So I apologize, and I will make myself a note to look into that and see if I can find an answer to either post in the comments, or if I can find if I can find an answer and it's a little bit longer or harder to put in the comments, I will bring it back up again next month when we have this Ask Me Anything again. So thank you very much, Curtis Edwards, for the question. I don't have a good answer for you now, so I'll get back to you. Then Tailwinds 247 says, I'm a private pilot studying for my oral. I'm having a hard time retaining the knowledge taught and understanding what question is being asked during a scenario-based questioning. Do you have any advice? And I do, but it's not necessarily easier. I think a lot of the training that we do and a lot of the a lot of the ground training that we've done in the past really kind of sets you up for what I would call call and response type questions. You know, what are the cloud clearance and visibility requirements for Class Delta airspace? 3 and 152. So we've got that. But if somebody comes in and says, okay, so the METAR at this Class Delta airspace says this, can you fly? Um, the difference is that we have to go backwards because we have to say, well, can I fly? What if the METAR says that? What is the visibility? Is it more than 3 statute miles or is it less? What is the cloud clearance? Is it can I get 1,000 feet above ground and still be 500 feet below the clouds? Um, so it takes that extra step for you to do that. So I think the best way to prepare for that is to get asked a lot more questions about um, from a scenario perspective rather than just kind of flashcard questions where you're given a question and like for example if you use the Sporty's study buddy, it's really preparing you to take the multiple choice knowledge test question. They have a lot of great information in there, but really it's designed for you to answer it with a multiple question answer. The same thing is true if you're using Gleim. um, if you're working on your instrument, it would be Shepherd Air or anything above that, or any of those ground school training classes really are about preparing you to pass the written test, not the oral. Um, the best way that I practiced it, or the way that I practiced most for it, was I actually asked my instructor to ask me these questions out of the blue, and to make me do most of the decision making when we were preparing for flights. So I showed up at the airport, and my instructor said, "So are we flying today?" And he was expecting me to look at the weather, interpret the weather, and then make a decision on the weather, because that's exactly what you're going to be doing on the check ride. Is you're going to be given this data and you have to turn it around. um, and then the harder ones to do that with are things like the federal regulations. What are your pilot limitations? How long, how many landings into a full stop or not do you need to have to take this flight that you're going to be taking? So ask your instructor to start asking you more of those questions, to not let you off the hook, and to make you go look for the answers if you don't have them, because that will get you in the practice of thinking through that a little bit more from a scenario based perspective. Um, Certainly, I'm more than willing to put together a similar mock oral type thing, and walk through that with you. If you want to schedule a one-on-one meeting with me, again, the link will be in the comments section of the actual published video. Um, but again, that's how I would work at it. The other piece that I do is, um, and this may sound kind of hokey or voodoo-ish, and that is, think about how you learn best. There are some people that are visual learners, so they like having pictures drawn or seeing an image or a video about how things work, and they gain a lot of information, and they keep a lot of information from things that they've seen with their eyes. Other people are readers. They can't absorb and use that knowledge until they've seen it printed on a piece of paper. Other people are oral learners, which means they process it through their ears. So until they hear it, they may not absorb the information. Now everybody learns a little bit using a little bit of all of those techniques, but I'm asking you to consider, how do you learn best? How are you most comfortable learning? For me, I'm an oral learner, which means that the way I studied best for my both written and oral exams was I created what I called audio flashcards. So I would ask a question, and then I would leave a space, and then I would record the answer. So it might be, and again, it might be, so um, the METAR says the wind is from 120 at 5 knots. The visibility is 10 statute miles. Clouds are 800 feet broken, and uh, temperature dew point and the altimeter reading is blah, 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 blah. Um, Now, the question is, can I take off from this airport? Pause. No, I cannot, because the ceiling and cloud clearances are not met for Class Delta airspace. Again, I'm kind of coming up with that off the top of my head. I actually sat down and created those lists of questions in a scenario base, and then I just kind of walked through them as I was driving to and from work. I spent typically I spent 45 minutes each way driving into work and driving away from work. So that gave me 45 minutes of an opportunity to go through this information over and over again. And by the time I was ready for my oral test, I actually had most of this information at the top of my head because I'd heard it over and over again. And I was actively trying to recall it in a way that kept me sharp. So again, if you're a visual person, maybe you can draw out a picture on a flashcard and then run through that. If you're a reader, write out the question on one side and then write out the answer on the other side. Whatever works best for you, and you can use combinations of these things as well. And again, I think if you use the learning the learning tool that's best for you, you will remember that information. You will remember that information much easier. Again, I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, because, quite frankly, part of what makes being a pilot such a cool thing is that it is a lot of effort to get there. So I wish you the best of luck. I hope Tailwinds 247 that this was helpful a little bit. Thank you very much for the question. And again, if your instructor isn't or can't help you with some scenario-based training, feel free to schedule some one-on-one time with me, and I'll be more than happy to ask you questions in a scenario-based way, and then maybe help you think through what the answers might be as well. And hopefully that would be helpful. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Curtis Edwards, I3L says, add one or subtract one. Yes, you're 1,000 feet off, but you know the air. Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. This goes back to the barometric pressure. Thank you. So anyway, I will look into that and see what I can find and get back to you with that. But thank you again for that question. That's awesome. Okay, next question that was sent in early, or sent in before. Somebody asked me during my last video, and then followed up with, well, to be honest, it was anonymous, so I assumed it was the same person because the question was very similar. I may not, I may be wrong on that, but in my last video, I talked about um, a cross-country flight that my wife and I were supposed to make that we ended up not making. And the question is, what references do I use to gather flight planning information, whether that be weather, NOTAMs, etc.? And just to let you know, I actually use a combination of different tools. I start off, I am a heavy ForeFlight user, as you probably noticed from my videos. So in a lot of cases, I actually start in ForeFlight. I use the daily weather to start with. It's not an official aviation forecast, but the problem with the official aviation forecasts are they're only 24 hours away. So if I'm going to be flying this weekend, I will usually, well, when I'm flying this weekend, I usually start the week by looking at the daily forecasts for the entire week to see what the weather is kind of going to shape up to be. Then I use the imagery. I like looking at the surface analysis charts. It shows me where the heavy weather systems are going to be. It shows me the pressure the pressure systems and where any fronts and frontal boundaries might be, outflow boundaries, all of those kinds of things. That gives me a good, a decent view of whether the weather's going to hang around, whether it's going to move through quickly, just kind of what's shaping up on a continental U.S. Scale. Um, then, as I get closer, I start leaning more and more on the aviation forecasts, whether that be the terminal aerodrome forecast. Um, if it's immediate, I'll be looking at the METARs. Um, and so I will look at that and use that to make some big decisions. But I don't just use that. I also use aviationweather.gov. Aviationweather.gov has a lot of really, really good tools. And you can step through the weather, the official terminal aerodrome forecasts, the winds forecasts, the clouds, the icing, all of those other forecasts. You can step through them 1 hour at a time in many cases. So it gives me a much more granular picture of what might be going on with the weather. So from a weather perspective, I use both the ForeFlight weather briefings and the image tools that are in there, and I use aviationweather.gov and the GFA tools to get the best picture I can of what's going on with the weather. NOTAMs are tricky, and I can tell you right now that the FAA they have several work groups together, and they're looking at NOTAMs and they're trying to make them easier to read and harder to miss things. Because right now, if you look at a list of NOTAMs for a flight, if you're looking at the obstacles versus communication versus things that might be going on at a specific airport, there can be pages and pages and pages of NOTAMs. And the question is, which apply to you and which don't? What I've found is if you go to 1-800-WXBrief.com or 800-WXBrief.com, it's a free account. You can log in to 800-WXBrief.com, put in your proposed flight plan, and then one of the things that WXBrief.com does, and I think very well, is they have a very good summary of the NOTAMs. And then you can actually go down and towards the bottom, you can look through the local NOTAMs, the en route NOTAMs, the communication NOTAMs, the international NOTAMs, and they will actually plot them on a map so that you can see them graphically as they compare to your route. Then, in addition to that, if the NOTAM has an altitude or a block of altitudes associated with it, it will actually highlight the NOTAMs in red that you really, really need to be worried about. So I use 800-WX Brief to get a very quick, very what I feel is better overview of what's going on with the NOTAMs. Now, having said that, everybody, Garmin Pilot, ForeFlight, 800-WX Brief, a couple of the other electronic flight bags, they are all trying to get better at making sure that you know what NOTAMs pertain to your flight and make sure that that it's difficult to ignore them. But right now, I kind of use 3 different tools for my flight planning. And it at first I was thinking, gosh, this is terrible because it's going to take me hours to do this. After I did it a couple of times, I actually can go through all 3 of these tools, ForeFlight, aviationweather.gov, and 800-WX Brief, in less than a half an hour for most of my flights. So the more you use them, the easier they get, and the faster you'll get at doing the flight planning. So whoever asked that question, if it was related to the video, thank you very much for watching the video and asking the question. If this is different, I hope that covered what you were looking for. And if not, please feel free to submit clarification, or if you're online, put it in the chat. So let's see here. What's the next question? Do I have any recommendations? This is from Justin Hall 6964. Do I have any recommendations for study guides after the written to prepare for the oral portion of the check ride? My school just says, look at the ACS. More directions would be great. Well, I can't argue with your school. The Airman Certification Standards for whatever you're looking at is really the height and breadth of what the designated pilot examiner and the FAA are expecting you to know. Um, so, uh, so I would take your school's advice. Now, having said that, um, the ACS is pretty good at it as a checklist item as you walk through it. But using it as a study guide, unless you're talking specifically about maneuvers, it's a little difficult because there's a lot of rather than naming the references, they name the number of the reference. And so it doesn't say things like page 39 of the go to page 39 of the PHAC to look here, go to the airplane flying handbook, this page to look here. So I do understand what you're talking about as far as that goes. But I would start with the ACS. The other piece that I would also highly recommend is that one of the last things you have to do after you've finished your written is you have to sit down with your flight instructor, and you and they need to go over every subject matter area that you missed on the written. So, and there's actually an endorsement where your instructor says, yes, the student and I have gone through all of these. I guarantee you that those things are going to show up on your check ride. If you look through the ACS, it says that they have to cover those things. So one of the first places I would start with is double down on the areas where you missed questions during your written test, because those are going to show up. The next piece is, and this is a little, there is there are mixed opinions about this. If you are going to a flight school and somebody else has had a check ride with that designated pilot examiner, a lot of times you can ask them, what does this designated pilot examiner focus on? What does the designated pilot examiner expect me to know off the top of my head? Going and chatting with those people that have taken that test already is not a bad place to start. You need to be careful though, because every check ride should be a little different. So don't use that as your sole study guide. Take some time, look through it, and say, "Oh, okay, this is these are the areas where this DPE likes to focus." But again, they're also going to focus on what you've missed on the written. One other thing that I'm putting together, and maybe I'll bring it next month, because I'll be much further along next month than I am right now. I'm actually putting together what I'm calling the annotated ACS. And the annotated, what I mean when I say the annotated ACS, it is going to be the FAA's Airman Certification Standards for private pilot. I'm starting with private pilot. But instead of it just being this knowledge area, and here in this area of emphasis, here's what you're going to need to know. The annotated ACS is actually going to have, you can find this information on page whatever of the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. And it will actually have a link in there so that you can click on that link and go to that section so that you can actually study it if you need more information on there. And I'm actually going to walk through every knowledge area and every risk area and every task area. Now, some of those it's going to be harder to have references for, but I am going to walk through, and there will be information and references on all of those pieces. So again, hopefully, Justin, hopefully that helps at least a little bit. But again, I would spend a fair amount of time looking at that, looking at the ACS. The other piece too, in addition to my annotated ACS, which may or may not be available in time for you, is ASA actually has a very good study guide for questions and topics that can show up on a private pilot check ride. Um, the caution I would make about those study guides is um, try and think of them in a scenario format rather than just here's the question, here's the answer. You'll need to think about, and they are getting better about actually putting it into a scenario and asking you to respond to that scenario. But again, ASA has a private pilot, instrument pilot, commercial pilot, CFI oral examination guide, and I think, well, I'm not going to guess at what the price is. When I bought mine, the price was $12. It may still be $12, but I bought mine several years ago. So, but those would also be a good place to look to look for things and ways to study for your oral exam and for your check ride. And then the last but not least, ask your instructor to regularly pound you with scenario based questions that he or she expects to show up on your check ride. So all of those things I think can help. And so hopefully that gives you a place to start. Let's see. Brendan Everett, P4H says, "What do you think the main topic is to study for the written? If you had to pick the most major one." Um, well, the real answer is all of them. All of them show up on the written. I would say that weather and aviation medical facts, aeromedical facts are going to show up a lot on the written. You're going to get multiple questions on those. Um, the rest of them, you're going to get probably a few questions on, like weight and balance. Airport operations, you're going to get several questions on. So I would say those are probably the the biggest or the most common um, topics, but you're putting yourself at a significant disadvantage if you're not trying to go through all of those materials. Um, the uh, the whole point behind it is to really see how much of the total information you have available to yourself when you're taking that test. And again, as long as you're getting a 70% or better, you'll be doing fine on the written. And then the whole point behind recovering the things that you missed during the oral is to give yourself an opportunity to uh, um, to uh, to cover the other pieces. Because the bottom line is there's a lot of information you need to know when you're flying an airplane, and the problem is you don't know when you're going to need any of that information. Some of that information, like interpreting the weather, interpreting the weather products and things like that, you're going to do and use every single time you fly. Performance numbers and takeoff landing distances, climb distances, fuel calculations, weight and balance. Those things are going to use all the time. Um, you're not going to use all of the weather information every time you fly. You're going to use some of it in the summer, some of it in the winter if you're in an area that has multiple seasons. And some of it, depending on where you live, you might not use at all. But the FAA wants you to be able to understand and know all of that stuff. So again, I would say you really do need to cover all of it, but you're going to see mostly about the weather products, aeromedical factors, some performance stuff, and then airport operations and signage and stuff like that. Those are the things that I think you're going to see on the most on the exam. Okay, next piece. Good evening, sir. Thank you very kindly for your outstanding informative videos. Oh, thank you. I live in Canada, Quebec, and I completed all my 4 written exams: weather law, general knowledge, and Navi. All right, woohoo! Let's give RCAF Polar Express a thumbs up. Awesome, that is great. Thank you very much for sharing that. That is definitely worth celebrating. So awesome, very very good. And you will pass your 2.5-hour flight test soon. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. Okay. Very, very good. Very, very good. Okay. I think that is actually the last prepared question, but I do have a couple other things that I want to run through really quickly before we say goodnight for tonight. I want to remind you again, if you didn't get enough information out of the answers that I provided here, or if you have something that didn't come up, or something that you think would be better asked and responded to in a conversation rather than texting and answering that way, please feel free to schedule some time with me. Again, this is the link right here, but I will say that it will be in the comments section, so you'll just be able to click on it and head to the scheduling application if you needed to be. And again, there's a brief questionnaire with that, and it's really about how should we connect and how much explain your problem in as much or your question in as much detail as possible, so that I don't so that we can get right to the answer and hopefully get you the information you need as rapidly as possible. So don't forget about that. And then the last thing I want to mention before I say thank you is please, please, please feel free to join us in April. Our next Ask Me Anything is April 27th, which is the last Monday of the month. It's at 7 p.m. Central. Same bat channel, same bat place. Okay, maybe some of you don't recognize that. When I was growing up, we used to watch Batman, and that's what they would say: same bat time, same bat channel, same bat place. So please feel free to join us on April 27th, same time, same place. And then the last thing I will mention, oh, Brendan says, thanks so much for your responses. This is thinking very far ahead, but if I'm studying for my private pilot in Florida, but I'm studying for my private pilot in Florida, eventually I want to be a CFI in Michigan. Should I go to Michigan to finish my training? Um, I don't know that that's really necessary. I would say that you should train where you think the training is going to be the most available. Michigan is a great place. I've flown to Michigan several times. It's a beautiful place to be. It's a beautiful place to fly. But there is a period of time in the winter when it's very difficult to get training done. If you can get all of your ratings and all of your training completed in Florida in a much more rapid pace because of the weather and because of aircraft availability, I would finish it up there and then go to Michigan and get some experience in Michigan. Again, I think the skills that you're learning when you're doing your private pilot, instrument, commercial, CFI, CFII, they are applicable anywhere in the United States. It's just you're going to run into some things more in some places than you will in other places. So again, I guess my advice would be look at your situation. If you think that you would be able to get all your training done faster, less expensively, and more efficiently in Florida, I'd say go do that, and then go look at getting some experience in Michigan. Rich says, thanks, Scott. Learned lots. RCAF Polar Express says, yes, I agree. Winter is a big factor about not flying. Yep. I think I flew 8 hours total this January. And people who are working on their private pilot flew significantly less than that. So yes. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you to all of you. Great Plains Aviation has been a great sponsor and has been very helpful in me getting these things put together. If you're looking for private pilot training through ASEL and MEL Instructor, and you're looking for a place to come fly, please feel free to come fly with us in Rochester, Minnesota. I do have some new sponsors coming up. Hopefully, I'll be able to introduce them at the April Ask Me Anything. These are people that I'd love for you to say thank you to because they help me be able to supply the information to you at no cost. So please say thank you, and if possible, please feel free to reach out to these sponsors. Other than that, I think that's the end of my presentations. Everybody have a great holiday coming up. And again, I look forward to seeing you in April on April 27th at 7 p.m. Central Time. And thank you very much. Everybody have a good night, and we'll talk to you later.